Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Roundtable Chat. Today I'm going to be joined by my friend, Paula Roberts, CEO of Halo Leadership, and we are going to be talking about how to communicate with impact. And one of the things that I know for sure, we do a lot of best practice research here at the Executive Roundtable on what makes leaders stand out. And with our partners at Management Research Group, one of the things that they found out time and time again is that what separates good leaders from great leaders is actually communication. It comes up ranked as number one. And so I was excited to have Paula join me today because when I think of all the people I know, Paula always stands out for me as one of those people who is the consummate communicator. Obviously, she's had a background in the field, but also just the her ability to kind of hold a room and communicate with an audience. So I thought it'd be great to have her come on the chat today and share some of her tips and techniques. So Paula, thanks for being here with us.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, and I thought, before we jump into the topic, why don't you give us the highlight reel of Halo Leadership and a little bit about your background? Let's get started with that.
Absolutely. Well, I started my career in communications corporate side, actually with Xerox Canada, and then transitioned to a long line of different marketing communications and advertising agencies. Did that for about 17 years, and about 10 years ago made a decision to jump to the client side of the advertising business, specifically to not-for-profit. And that chapter of my life started at Sick Kids Foundation, where I had the privilege of being their first ever vice president of marketing, and launched a campaign known as Believe that was all about getting people to come to understand that sick kids, despite being a world leader, needed your support financially. Did that for about 4 years and then went to Plan Canada, had a chance to work on a wide range of business there, overseeing a $100 million portfolio. And when I was there, had a chance to launch Because I'm a Girl, which is a really powerful gender equity program that I'm so proud of. Over the course of those 10 years, I really did get bitten by the not-for-profit bug. And when the time came for me to write my next chapter, it was to start my own agency with a very particular focus on branding and fundraising for the not-for-profit sector. So we like to say that Halo Brand Leadership is the intersection where doing good meets with delivering results.
I love it. Fantastic and good for you. I think probably the not-for-profit world is very happy that you've decided to go out on your own so you can help more agencies. Okay, so let's talk about communication and how we as leaders can increase our impact. I mean, you've worked with a lot of big brands, you've built some big campaigns. So what are if you could boil it down to top 3 tips, I know that's a tough question, but what are the top 3 tips you think people need to think about when they're structuring their pitch or their presentation?
For sure. I think it is good to boil it down to a few little sound bites, and I would say that these are applicable for a public-facing pitch or presentation, but hopefully too also for one-on-one communication that so many leaders are just their bread and butter every day. I think the first thing that I really encourage people to do is take the time to get to know your audience and design your presentation from their point of view, not from your point of view. I think that's absolutely critical. And sometimes we assume that what we have to say is so clear or so self-evident that we just sort of deliver it in fire hose fashion versus anticipating what that audience will have as questions or points where there isn't clarity. Anticipate their questions and try to answer them as you go. I think number 2, it really is this idea of structuring your presentation in a way that tells your audience what they can expect, then you deliver your message, and then tell them what you told them. People are busy, and you need to give them a chance to organize how they're going to absorb all that information. So a simple agenda to start and then a wrap up at the end is a great way to go, where you actually repeat your messages in various detail, say 3 times. And I also like to encourage people to tell stories rather than just provide data. Data can be difficult to retain. It isn't particularly engaging as people's minds wander. If you tell a story, people do tend to, I think, follow that storyline a little bit in a different way and absorb and understand what you're saying, especially if you embrace tip number 1, which is to tell it from their view. And I am going to fit a 4th one in. I just can't resist. Always end a presentation or a pitch by telling people what this means to them. Make it personal. So here's what you should do. Here's why you should care. Here's what this means to you. So hopefully that's a collection of little tips that will help folks as they're putting together their presentation.
I think that's great. And I think I love what you said about, the understanding the audience, because I think it's one of my friends said to me, she goes, we always pitch stuff based on our values. Yeah. And really to be successful, we have to think about what does the audience value? What's important to them?
100%. And certainly now that I'm working more and more in not-for-profit, that's particularly the case, because you're talking about issues that are so sensitive and powerful.
Yeah, it's so true. But I remember when I was in not-for-profit, I mean, the personal, I was going to use the word agenda that people bring to the table in any situation is really a big driver, right?
Absolutely.
Involved.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what do you think? What's one thing that you think people really underestimate when they go into communicating with a group?
I think that this actually relates back to my first set of tips, which is I do think that often people assume that their audience is going to be interested in their topic. And I'm not suggesting that they're coming to a presentation disinterested, but they're probably coming to a presentation really, really busy, definitely a million things on their mind. They just got an email that they need to respond to and have stepped away from. You really do need to take the time to simultaneously, I would say, inform, involve, and entertain. So, you do need to do those in equal measure. You need to think about the way you deliver your message just as much as what your content is. And ideally, I do like shouting out to the audience or asking them a question or setting them up in a way that they can actually participate. I think that if you do spend time in creating your presentation in that way, you're going to have engagement that you might not necessarily want to take for granted.
That's awesome. Those are great. One of the things that when I was thinking about this topic, I was really thinking about those pitches where things go sideways. And you talked a little bit about, think about your objections and how you're going to overcome them. I love being on my feet. I actually ad-lib better than I do scripted. So, curveballs and things for me, I actually kind of find fun. But if you're, that person, you're maybe more analytical, you've really got your things thought out. How do you respond? What are some tips for being able to respond to those curveballs? Because I think often when I talk to a lot of our members, and they've gone in and they've made the big executive team pitch, invariably somebody's asked some question or taken the whole thing sideways. Any sort of tips and techniques for those people who may not be quick thinkers or is comfortable with the impromptu responses that you're often required to do in a pitch?
It's a little bit of a boring answer, but sometimes those boring answers are the ones that serve us best. What I tell people to do is really spend the time in preparation. And I do think in pitches or presentations, we tend to run it right till the 11th hour, and we don't actually take that time to bring it all together. So like you, I'm also pretty comfortable on my feet, but one of the things that I've learned to do that really feeds that comfort is to write down what my overall key messages for the whole presentation are. So those 3 or 4 takeaways that I want people to understand, and I will take the time to put those on a note card. I won't even necessarily refer to that note card in the presentation, but the act of crystallizing them as sound bites in one small space, I think embeds them in your brain at a different place. And you can almost think of those messages or those key points as your security blanket. You can always revert to those. You can always revert to those. So I think that's one way to do it. I think the other thing as well too is this idea of actually rehearsing and assigning a friend or a colleague to come up with the most difficult questions they can imagine. Don't, position those questions with them. Let them try and knock you off your feet. Set yourself up for that challenge. And just like anything, you will get better at forming your thoughts on the spot. So you have to kind of train for it the same way you would a sport. I think ultimately what I've also learned too is that it is okay to say, let me think about that for a moment. And if you need to be able to say, I don't know that answer right now, but I'll be able to get back to you before the end of the day. And that certainly isn't ideal, but it's a much better approach, I think, than committing yourself to an answer that you're making up or that you haven't had an opportunity to vet. That last piece is really from years of good media relations training. where you don't always have to know every single answer on the spot. So hopefully that collection gives people some approaches that they can use to work that muscle of getting more comfortable on their feet.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I'm so with you on the preparation one. If I think of once, because I do have a tendency to wing it. I mean, I think that's my default, is actually to move to winging it. And, you know, sometimes you can get away with that when you're good on your feet, but there's lots of times in my career where, you know what, I needed to do a lot more prep than I did, or give myself more space to do the prep. I was kind of cramming my prep in. Right, you know, in the 11th hour. And I think sometimes when we're people who tend to operate that way, like the pressure of the deadline and that kind of thing, it's not giving ourselves enough buffer. And so I've had some, you know, I think I can look back on my career and there's some, you know, probably some pretty not full-on train wreck moments, but moments where I wasn't as impactful as I could have been, partly because I hadn't been as prepared as I needed to be.
Yeah.
What about for yourself? I mean, I think we often learn a lot from our big mistakes. What is there a situation that stands out in your mind around, you know, a communication experience that did not go according to plan, and what you took away from it that you could share with the group?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I think a lot of people think that you learn the most from your failures. I think you learn a lot from failures, but I do think you learn from successes too. And I really encourage people to take the time in any case to actually do a mental debrief with themselves or their team to think about what went well, how would we handle that next time. As you say, so often we're just running from obligation to obligation that we don't take the time to prepare. We also don't take the time to debrief. And so really to sit and reflect and consciously address gaps or issues, you know, in real time so that you won't encounter them going forward. You know, one of the biggest things as it pertains to communications is technology. Again, it sounds super boring, but there's nothing worse than having a PowerPoint presentation that goes awry, or, you know, having materials that don't function as they should. And I do think that ultimately, again, you have to have that backup plan that's worst case scenario, that if everything goes wrong, how are you going to deliver? So is that a hard copy of the PowerPoint presentation that you would necessarily bring with you? Is it that note card of those key messages that you're going to revert to in any case? I think that you do always have to have that worst case backup plan from a technology standpoint. And then I think also, you know, in terms of failures, as you said, I don't think I've ever had a true train wreck. I love that word, and I wish our viewers none of that. But I do think that if you spend some time really thinking about your audience in advance and talking to the organizer about their issues, their interests, then you will have a better sense of what can go wrong. And watch the audience. If you're losing them during a presentation, which is when I think things are really going sideways. You've seen it happen. People are picking up the iPhone, they're checking their emails, they're drifting off. Abridge your material. You're going to have to pick it up. They're not listening to what you've got to say, or call out a question or a point of interest to them, you know, to wheel them back in. So whether it's technology or a drifting audience, I think it really is about sensitivity and being aware in the moment that you are being as effective as you believe yourself to be. Helpful.
You know what, those are fantastic tips. And I love this idea. I think I've seen so many people kind of try and plow through, you know, their content, and you just want to say, stop.
It's not worth it, you know, and you're going to be much more memorable and better heard. Again, reverting to that note card, what are those key messages? Who knows what people bumped into before they came into the meeting room that day? Really present it to them, not versus how you memorized or imagined presenting it to them.
Awesome. Well, Paula, thank you so much for sharing all your wealth of wisdom. I'm sure we could probably keep talking all day, but better keep this short. So thanks, and we'll have you back again, I think, to talk about some other issues pertaining to communication and brand if you're up for it.
Sounds great. Thank you, Glyne.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, and thanks for tuning in, everybody. You'll be able to find this on our website and on our YouTube channel, and stay tuned next month, where we're actually going to be tackling how to bring more gravitas to your role. If you've been told that you need to up your executive presence and bring more gravitas to your role, we're going to be exploring that topic with Kim Ulmer from RBC. So stay tuned for that. Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your week, everybody.